Hey guys, Montel here, and thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of Free Thinking with Montel. The holidays are getting close, and everybody's trying to wind down a little bit that way. But at the same time, there's so much angst in our nation today. Angst from political points of view, angst from social economic points of view, angst from just angst everywhere. And when there's so much angst in our forethought, we forget about the things that are most important to us. And one of the things I think that a lot of us forget about is the sacrifice so many have made to protect and defend the freedoms that we have. And I'm talking about our veterans. I still hear it all the time when I go to airports, I walk around, I'll see a veteran walk by and I'll hear somebody say out of the side of their mouth, "Oh, thank you for your service." And they just turn around and keep walking as if, that statement is enough to appease them, maybe not the veteran, but appease them that they have done something to acknowledge, those who have done so much for us. But I really think it's time that we stop and make a pause and remember that, I'm so sorry to say this, and I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer or Mr. Bummer, but, we still have a significant veteran suicide rate in this country on a daily basis. We have a significant veteran addiction rate in this country on a daily basis. We have veterans and veteran families that are suffering. There are so many that are thriving. Let me like this straight. Yes, in fact, we have so many of them. Some estimates are 89 and 90% of our veterans really have no problems whatsoever. But that doesn't help us ignore, or that shouldn't let us ignore the 10% that do have problems. And there are those that are out there every single day in the trenches, fighting and digging deep, trying to do as much as they can, not just say thank you for your service, but showing it every single day by doing things and putting forth initiatives that can help a veteran be resilient and be strong and, recapture their dignity and recapture their lives. And my guest today, is a person who has literally, been doing this on a daily basis. My guest today served in the United States Marine Corps for more than 27 years. He retired out of Quantico, Virginia in 2014 as a regimental sergeant major for the Wounded Warrior Regiment, where he oversaw the coordination of non-medical care to combat and non-combat wounded, ill, and injured Marines. His awards and decorations include everything from the Purple Heart to Meritorious Service Medal to Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medals to Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal to Combat Action Ribbon to the Marine Corps Good Conduct Medal to the Humanitarian Service Medal and also the National Defense Service Medal, and many, many more. He's now the Executive Director of the Disabled Veterans National Foundation, the DVNF. Mr. Joseph Vanfonda, thank you so much, sir, for being a part of Free Thinking with Montel today. Thank you for being here, sir, and thank you for your service.
Montel, thank you for having myself here at your podcast. We're here very excited to be here. And, I'm just excited to have this opportunity to talk about the Disabled Veterans National Foundation and how we provide our services and care throughout the United States.
Well, look, that's what you're here for, is to talk about that, the DVNF, the Disabled Veterans National Foundation. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit more about your background. What made you decide, we're about the same age, and, we came up into the service about the time, I think I'm a little older than you, but we came into the service at a time when, our service wasn't respected. Coming right out of Vietnam. When did you enlist?
I enlisted in delayed entry program at the end of 1986.
Okay.
My story is pretty much in the trenches of society. My grandmother had 22 children. My mother was number 21 of those 22 children, which she was married very young, and she divorced when I was 7 with a 5th grade education. And, I grew up on welfare, very poor. My brothers and sisters never graduated high school. I stayed within high school, graduated high school, joined the Marine Corps because I wanted to be out of that rut of society. And what gave me the drive to do that was an older gentleman who lived on our block that was a Vietnam veteran. And I kind of followed him a little bit, and he gave me a little bit of direction in my life, and that helped me to become what I am today.
It's crazy. You said Vietnam vet. I'm a Vietnam era vet. I came in 1974 in the delayed entry program. Also, I enlisted in late, I think it was late 73. And then as soon as I graduated from high school the following year, I went off to boot camp. Um, and, but back then, and the Vietnam era vets, there wasn't the same respect for veterans that there is today. As a matter of fact, I can remember when I walked out of boot camp out of Paris Island in 74, stopping in a restaurant. My parents came down and aunt and uncle came down to drive me up to Baltimore before I went off to my first duty station. And I had a couple days leave, so I was going to take that leave and spend it with my family. I remember stopping in Northern Virginia at a restaurant, and literally the guy walked out of a restaurant as we were walking in and spit on the ground before me, and I was still in my uniform, and I was just so angry. I wanted to punch him right in the side of his head, but I didn't, of course. And, I mean, I can remember, going back home and people, when I had my uniform on, ride in the car, people yelling baby killer and all this kind of craziness.
Mhm.
So, to have a Vietnam era vet inspire you, I'm just trying to figure out what was in you, Joe, that said, you know what, I think I'm going to serve.
Well, it's kind of odd on how I was raised. I mean, I was raised with no father, unfortunately. My mother with a fifth grade education, struggling to make ends meet and relying on that welfare check. I remember her waiting on the porch the first of each month for that welfare check. And that opened my eyes. I was like, I can't, I don't want this anymore. I want something more than just what social services can have to offer. Not that my mother didn't try or anything. So I started looking at my friends. I hung around with individuals that had family structure. I listened to individuals that had a family. And one of the Vietnam veterans named Morris Williams gave me a little bit of intent and always told me, "Hey, stay off the streets," and I kind of like listened to that a little bit. But knowing how I grew up, knowing that the struggles that were there, I relied on school. Most kids, that had, would walk on the stage at the end of the year to get their award, let it be math, science, or whatever. I always had the perfect attendance. I had the perfect attendance since I was since fourth grade all the way up to a senior. Senior skip
You're better than me, my friend.
Exactly. Senior skip year, everyone's skipping, and I'm in class by myself because the school provided me structure, and I needed that because I wasn't getting it at home, unfortunately. And it was not a good upbringing, unfortunately. Not to discredit my mother or what cards were dealt with her, but you can't choose who you're born to. So I tried to make the best of it, and I used my environment, the village, in somewhat to help me and bring all those positive attributes that they had to offer, and I built my resiliency upon that. So, I was working 3 jobs as a senior, and one day I walked into the Marine Corps office. And I said I want to be a Marine, and the next step, the guy says, "Okay, you're going to be direct shift." Went down to Mets, took the test. Following day, I'm getting my physical. Third day, I'm on a plane to South Carolina. And that just changed the course of my life. And what helped me within the military, believe it or not, was the different ethnic backgrounds and individuals from all over the United States that joined the Marine Corps, one big melting pot. And that just made me a better individual and helped build upon my resiliency. Joining the Marine Corps as a private and retiring as a sergeant major, my background of, growing up in a Rudder society, I thought that was a pretty good achievement. And being a wounded warrior, understanding the carnage and what happens on a battlefield, I last few years of my Marine Corps career, where I was just traveling the United States, visiting all our polytrauma hospitals and looking at our wounded warriors and seeing the carnage that was left in the hospital. And that was probably harder than being on a battlefield, believe it or not. These young individuals, young children, young wives, broken families, and providing the resources for them, and not only the non-medical case management for those wounded warriors. So I've learned a lot, and my heart is heavy with that. And I think that prepared me for working in the veteran community. And I'm just tickled pink to have the relationship with you and your organization and track and follow what you do in the veteran community as well, because that's inspiring as well. You talk and hang around with individuals that care, that makes you even a better individual. So I appreciate your time as well.
No, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit. I'm not just trying to make you relive this, but I think I want you to share this with our viewers. You were actually injured in combat and then went on and stayed on active duty. Let's talk about what happened. How were you injured? What was going on? Give me that story.
Well, I was an infantry first sergeant with the Warriors, 2-2 Warriors, and we had orders to hold down a bridge south of Baghdad, probably about 28 miles south in the Babil province. Well, I remember the battalion commander came in and says, hey, first sergeant, where's your company commander? Of course, he was at the chow hall because we had patrols that evening. Well, go get your commanding officer. So he told the commanding officer to take half the company and go hold this one bridge that was hit by a mortar round, and it looked like somebody took a big bite out of it, and hold that bridge until combat engineers get there and so forth and provide security. So he did that. So about 4 hours into that, he was met with ambush, and we were taking heavy fire as well as suppressive mortar rounds on the grove, probably about 500 meters in front of the bridge. So we called back for support. Commanding officer came in, first sergeant, take the rest of your company, and I want you to get to that bridge. I want you to hold that bridge, whatever it takes. So I went to the ASP. How it works usually is the company commander goes forward with the company gunny. I stay back with the XO. That way you have command and control on both ends, and hit the XO up with that. And we ready the ASP with all the mortar rounds, claymores, ammunition, so forth to reinforce and help suppress the enemy. So, of course, we're probably gone within 35 minutes hitting the road. So by the time we get to the bridge, there was no activity happening. And my company gunny comes running up to the MTVR. I was the lead vehicle. He goes, hey, first sergeant. I says, what's going on? He goes, well, we were taking mortar fire and suppression through the grove. It seemed to calm down. As soon as I got there, we offloaded the MTVR around the big bite out of the bridge. And I went to the top of the bridge where the commanding officer was, and he was calling for air support at the time. And that's when we started taking mortar rounds. So as I'm on the bridge, first mortar round hit our attack vehicle, wounded our company commander in the thigh. But he still held onto the mic, calling for skid mounts and so forth. And then at that time, I just took cover. Me and my company gunny were hauling tail off the bridge. So as we were hauling tail off the bridge, mortar rounds are kept on marking our footing. One of the mortar rounds hit behind us, and that's where the blast kind of like hit me a little bit, got peppered, and the fall is what hurt me. So over in Iraq, the bridges, they have concrete culvert bridges, and they have big pipes that hang out for discharge of waste. So as I'm being blasted over the bridge, I remembered my training where you keep your heels together, and you clench your weapon. So as I'm in the air coming down, I remember hitting the back of that concrete culvert, and my leg hit that pipe, broke my ankle and so forth, and a little TBI, shoulder issues and so forth. So I remember waking up and just numb, like a big TV news channel, just vibrating clouds of this fuzz. It rattled me pretty good, but I had some good Marines. They pulled me out of the culvert. They put me in the attack vehicle, and we just kind of like fought and fought the enemy, suppressed the enemy. Of course, I was on my back in the back of a mounted 50 cal vehicle, Hummer. And I remember hot brass flying all over me, and the young Marine was saying, "Sergeant, sorry, first sergeant, sorry, first sergeant," as that brass was hitting me. But the funny, you look. So when you're in a situation like that, and there was many of them, I look at the funny aspect of what transpired. Like for instance, the mortar rounds were hitting behind us, and I'm running with our company gunny, and we're looking at each other, and we're looking to jump over the corner of that bridge, and he got to a safer aspect of the bridge than I did. But I remember the mortar rounds hitting, and popped him in the tail, and Alabama guy, and all you hear was, "Ew, I'm hit," So I'm kind of like giggling in a way as I'm hauling tail, looking at the funny aspect of this. But
Sure.
but I look at the fun part, not the fun. There's no fun about combat whatsoever. But just to get you through the reconciliation of what transpired, and to help suppress, unfortunately, because the mission goes on. to understand it and try to make fun of it a little bit. And you know, that's just one combat story of many that we all been through. You know, but my particular thing was the fall got me. You know, traumatic brain injury. You know, peppered spray on mortar round, a couple broken bones. You know, in the leg area and so forth.
How long did it take you? How long did it take you to recover? I'm sure they got you out of. You got out of the comments.
Well, actually, by the time they got me to our fob, which was St. Michael's, which is an old chicken factory, it was probably about 7 hours later by the time they got me back to the fob, because we couldn't, you know, we were fighting and suppressing, waiting for comm engineers. They finally showed up and they're helping us suppress and taking care of the enemy. And then we started moving south towards St. Michael. And I just remember laying on my back and I'm seeing luminous pop-ups going up, left side, right side. I'm yelling to our gunner as I listen. I says, they're marking our target, they're marking our area, because they're, you know, they've got the pop-ups to the left and to the right of our vehicle, and we're taking more mortar rounds. So I just remember pushing through that, and then we hit our fob, and we're in the Sunni Triangle, by the way. So it's a pretty, and this is in 2004 in April, so it's pretty arduous in terms of fighting friend and foe. And by the time I got to the base, of course, you hit your medical staff right there, and they do your priority routine or urgent care for you. And they couldn't move me to Baghdad for 31st Cash at the time to get me out of there. So I think it was a good day and a half, 2 days by the time they put me in an unarmored vehicle. At the time we had no unarmored vehicle, and they moved me up north with a convoy, a security team, and got me to the hospital. And of course, I spent some time there. And here's the thing, though. So we were taking wounded pretty good. The Marines were, and of course, the Army and the National Guard. And the hospital, which was a Baghdad hospital, by the way, they're not very good, but you know, the military took that hospital over. But they would put me in a triage tent. So I'm in this tent, and believe it or not, I still got my 9mm, by the way. I still had that, and I held it with my left hand, because my right side was kind of screwed up. And I remember in a tent, we had wounded enemy that were in that tent. We had wounded Navy SEALs that were in that tent. We had a collage of wounded individuals. And I had this one Navy officer, and he was coherent and everything. And I made friends. He slept in a cot right next to me. He asked me how I got my 9mm in. I said, well, it's going to stay with me until I'm gone. You know, infantry first sergeant, I'm not letting go of my weapon. But he helped me, he got me food and got me to see the doctor again and so forth. But he was there because he had a injury to an ear. I think it was probably a mortar round that blew his drum out in his ear, but we became friends. And I remember 2:00 in the morning, about 10 days after there, I'm being pulled out of my rack, and they're loading me up in I think it was a Cobra or something, some type of aircraft Air Force had, Army had, and they just moved me out of there to Al Assad at the time. So here I am in Al Assad. I get there, and I remember getting there, and
that's tough, sir. It's okay.
So I'm in this makeshift hospital on the air base of Al Assad. And my injuries are not, I'm more of a priority, not an urgent. And I get into this tent, and it's a medical tent. They got individuals that are amputees, burn unit individuals there, and we're just waiting for that next life flight to bring us to Germany. So I just remember going in there, and I think they gave me something. It was at an IV, and next I'm passed out. So I wake up. I'm not sure how long I was passed out for or sleeping for, but I wake up, and doctors and nurses are running around putting flat jackets on us, armored jackets on us, as we're laying down, because we're taking mortar rounds in Al Assad Air Base. Boom, boom, boom. And the tent next to us took a direct hit. And I remember one of the docs came in and says, they just took out one of our surgical tents.
Wow.
So I remember this, and I think what's making me emotional right now is that there was a young Spec 4 Army, Spec 4 engineer, I think Spec 4 is, right next to me is a double leg amputee, African American, and I just can't get this part out of my mind. He goes, "I let my men down. I let everybody down." And I told me, I said, you did your job. Excuse me, Montel.
It's okay,
This
my
is
man.
painful for me because
No, I know, I know.
I never shared this with anyone.
No, thank you so
And
much.
there's clips of operations and my service that flash back to me. And this is one of them because that young man, probably about 21 years old, 20 years old, was worried about his men. And he's sitting there with no legs, blown to crap, you know. And I'm sitting there, I says, you did nothing wrong. You served your country. You're a friggin' hero. I'm proud of you. And I reach over and I just wanted to touch him because I don't know, I just wanted to touch him. So anyway, the doctors came back in and so forth, and they're giving us some more juice or whatever the heck it was. And I remember waking up, I don't know, much later, I guess, and the doctors, they're taking pictures of him and his Purple Heart, the same Wounded Warrior next to me, and they're taking pictures as if he's a static display, and that pissed me the hell off.
Mm.
As if they're benefit from this individual being wounded. And I know they're not in terms of that, but these are civilian doctors that get activated. I don't know what it was, but they're taking pictures of this individual holding his Purple Heart while he's got bells and whistles coming in and out of him, and he's trying to survive. And that pissed me off. So I got really upset, and excuse my language. And I was like, he's not a friggin' static display. I'm just going off. And next year I know they're juicing me up with something else. And, and I remember waking up to being carried to, I don't know if it was a C5, C-131. It was a big bird. And then they put us on these, you walk into this. Well, I didn't walk in, they carried us into it. And then the way they do the gurneys is they have them in 4 layers, down the center, and up on the sides. And they have nurses and doctors running up and down the aircraft. And I remember the way they put you in the gurneys is routine, priority, and urgent. And I'm not a priority. I think I'm a priority, but I'm not a urgent. So they put me kind of like in the middle, and you're like this for hours. And there's no going to bathrooms, no getting up. One of those things. And I just remember I needed to go to the bathroom. I didn't want the catheter in me, and the nurses are stepping on and dealing with the priority and urgent and so forth. And that was something else to go through the medevac system, understanding and the sacrifice and hard work that the doctors and nurses are doing. But not only that, but looking at the resiliency of these wounded warriors that are fighting for their lives on this bird, so we can get to not Walter Reed Bethesda, but Germany at the time. So going through that process and understanding that, it sticks with you. So you have the carnage, and then you have the anxiety and the mentality of muscle memory in combat. And then when you get complacent and relaxed at some point, and I wasn't excited about going home, believe it or not. I was an infantry first sergeant. I was worried about my 179 Marines and sailors that I had that they're going to be without a first sergeant, which I'm like, Dad. So that's on my mind, and hearing the agony of the wounded warriors. And of course, I'm pointing to the nurses and doctors running up and down the aircraft. That individual is screaming, and of course they shut me up. And next thing you know, I'm waking up where I'm being offloaded from that aircraft. And of course, you get your flag officers and individuals that are, making you feel welcomed home and so forth. And as soon as you get to the hospital, you're going right to the ER, and they're patching you up for the next step, and routine, priority, to urgent. That's what they look at. Who's routine here? Who's priority here? Who's urgent here? Urgent goes first. So and then I remember going to my hospital room and being seen by the doctor and so forth. And I was there for a good probably 15 to 20 days before I went to Walter Reed Bethesda. And then from there, I was there for a little while. And, they patch up as you go. And I go back to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. But I think what hurt me in terms of my PTSD that I've dealt with is those clips of the emotional things that I witnessed, not only in my moving from combat, being wounded, to back to CONUS, but also in combat. When you're walking through a grove that's on fire and being shot at, and you have a young Marine that looks at you and he throws his weapon down, he says, "First Sergeant, I'm scared." You take the weapon, you put it in his chest, you say, "I got the same fear you do. We're going to do this." And he picks that rifle up and he sees that you have the same fear, and he has that confidence, and you help him with that resiliency, and you get through that conflict. You get through that firefight. But those little things that it's not about shooting around and hitting your target. It's about those emotional relationship things that you all come together as service members going through a mission, accomplishing a mission, from commanding officer to a company commander, to an executive officer, to squad leaders. Those emotional things and the ties that ties us together is understanding, knowing that we're feeling the same thing that you're feeling. So I think my PTSD ranges from those little relationships that I had with my seniors, my juniors, my peers, funny situations, sad situations. You get wounded, you get your KIAs, unfortunately, going through their inventory, writing a letter home to their mom at 2 a.m. in the middle of the desert, wondering how fast that letter is going to get to them, inventory of the personal gear, and then going back out there, touching every service member, every wounded warrior, not every wounded warrior, but every Marine and sailor that's getting ready to go out on patrol. That's one thing I did, was I would go out there and we do a pack count, and the pack count would be like, okay, how many packs, how many Marines are going, make sure they got their combat loaded. And I make sure I touched them. I wanted to touch all of them because I'm not too sure if they were going to come back. And they knew that as well, but we don't talk about it. I want to put my hand on the shoulder. "Hey, brother, see you after this patrol." And I go back and I would take shifts in the middle of the night. And I remember, Montel, I used to listen to BBC, also hanging out the TAC and listen to the patrols because my Marines out there in patrols. And I remember hearing, 3 killed Americans.
Right.
3 killed Americans. This is when the number was 3. And I remember spending many nights taking watches, let the young Marines sleep. And I remember hearing 15, 18, 49, 89. And I'm hearing this throughout the days. And the casualties are going up, and my boys are outside the wire in the Sunni Triangle. And I'm like, wow. And it's want me to be a little bit closer to my Marines. So I'd wake up in the middle of the night before they go on patrol. I make sure that I'm with the company commander, and we're touching packs, and we're pounding them on the chest, and we go back and observe their patrols and so forth and so forth. So I look back at all those things, and I remember those as if it was yesterday. And
looking back, Joe, at all of those things, man. I mean, you recovered. How long did it take you to recover from your injuries?
I would have to say probably about 18 months fully.
And during that 18-month period of time, I know that they gave you the opportunity to get out. I mean, you could have stepped out and said, "My injuries are enough. I can't. My ankle hurts too bad. The pain in my back's too bad. The PTSD is too bad." They would have retired you, but you decided to stay on active duty, right?
That's correct.
And I mean, what was the job that you had when you actually recovered?
All right. So when I was wounded, actually, and I was able to stand up and be movable, which they moved me to 2nd Marine Division headquarters, actually. And they had a casualty center that they were standing up, and I was part of that casualty center. So before they created the Wounded Warrior Regiment or Wounded Warrior Battalions, or even the thought of having a Wounded Warrior Project, they had the casualty center. And what they were doing is they were looking at how they did it back in Vietnam. Because Vietnam did it right, or we learned from Vietnam. And they stood up a casualty center, and then we came up with the idea of creating somewhat of a Wounded Warrior battalions, where individuals that would be able to transition out of the military, we will send them to their home area where they have family support, and then it would be transitioned from there, or they can go to a battalion, not their battalion that's forward, but we would create a battalion east and west for just wounded warriors, ill and injured, that either can get healthy and get back to full duty or transition out. So I did that for a little while, and then I would knock on the Second Marine Division Sergeant Major Hensworth at the time. He's a great individual, and he was on his way over to Iraq for a full year. And I remember going up there every day. He goes, "You're not on full duty yet. You need to run a PFD." Oh, well, I went out and ran a PFD. So, and while I was on light duty, but I ran a PFD, and I spoke to my docs. I want to get back on full duty, and from there, I was at 2-2. They sent me to 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, the Beirut Battalion, and put me with a weapons company, infantry 1st Sergeant again. So, and next we're picking up new drops, new young Marines out of SOI, training them, and we're going to get ready to go back over in combat. So, and that's what transpired. So I knocked on that door, kept on bothering the heck out of them. I wanted back with the young Marines. I didn't want to be up there with the brass and counting numbers. So I went to 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. We trained and we deployed again. And then from there, combat operations again, Haditha Dam, 24th MU, Lebanon, Condoleezza Rice, evacuating her from Lebanon at the time, and doing combat operations in Haditha Dam and south of Iraq again, and so forth. So, and then of course after that, I got selected as Sergeant Major, and of course I was a Wounded Warrior at the time, part recipient, and I felt that I'd be best suited for the Wounded Warrior Regiment up there at Headquarters Marine Corps, tracking and handling all the non-medical case management of wounded, ill, and injured. And I think what helped me with that job, Montel, was I went through the medevac process. I was injured. I've seen the carnage of war.
Firsthand.
And I'll tell you what, the hardest part of that job was visiting those VA hospitals. One week I'm in Tampa, I'm at a polytrauma. I'm up in Missouri. I'm up in Texas at a burn unit, and I'm all over the place. I was probably gone about 28 days out of a month. And I'd done that for a couple of years. So, and then you would see that carnage in the hospital and it would break your heart. You got an 18-year-old double leg amputee, 18-year-old wife with a 6-month-old child, and then you got your mother and father right there. See that carnage, and looking at the resiliency of these young individuals saying, "Hey, Sergeant Major, I want to be back with my Marines. Give me some legs. I want to go back." It just put a lot of weight on your heart. Right. So I've done that for a little while, and and here's the thing, though, I made sure that I understood what our non-medical case managers were doing. I became a recovery care coordinator. I didn't become one, but I went through the training. Traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress. I just studied up on all that. I got my training and certificates through the Military Health Systems Network, so I can understand our counselors and a non-medical case management platform that we were delivering. So I wanted to know what the training was about on the non-medical case management, so I can better suit and better take care of these service members.
And you stayed in for 27 years, and then you took on the position as the Executive Director of Disabled Veterans National Foundation. What pointed you in that direction?
Well, I used to guest speak throughout the United States, statesman stuff in terms of wounded warriors and trying to tie nonprofit organizations that are serving veterans to serve our transitional service members. I think I was speaking at a VFW convention in Arizona or maybe Vegas at the time. But I remember receiving a phone call after I dropped my retirement papers 14 months out. And I didn't know who they were, but it was the president, Priscilla, at the Disabled Veterans National Foundation, who was wondering if I would be interested to take over the organization. So I did my research on the organization, and they were under a lot of scrutiny. They were lacking in fiduciary responsibilities and oversight and proper management. And I was like, wow, I'm in. I said, I don't want to go into an organization as a sergeant major that's hitting home runs. I want to go in somewhere where I can do some hard work. I want to erect it and so forth. And I took that organization over, and we changed out board of directors. We changed out staff. We created new programs, new platforms, call to action, joint cost allocation, you name it, we've done it. and we're in a better position now to serve our veterans nationally. And that's what I've been doing.
And the organization was founded before that. How long had the organization been in existence, and what was its mission before you got involved?
Well, the organization was founded in 2007 by 5 founding ladies that were part of the Veterans Administration in terms of serving their communities throughout the United States. They just came together, had a great idea, um, and their idea and their mission was serving disabled and critically wounded and ill, injured service members transition out of the military. So I kept that same mission, and what I did was I created profound platforms can actually serve them better strategically. And we do that by capacity building grant program, where we fund other nonprofits that you're familiar of. Our health and comfort, where we fund disabled and at-risk veterans at homeless shelters and veteran stand-downs nationally. And then I do my special initiative, which is a CEO and staff thing, where I pick something special that can serve our veterans. Let it be working with Military Makeover or Operation Career or funding another nonprofit, Pause for Life, and so forth. And then, of course, we just built a national job board. And I got that idea actually from one of your talks, one of your shows that you do. I think it's Operation Career you do.
Yes.
I was watching your show one I think it was Sunday morning or early morning, and I'm like, wow. I says, why can't we build a platform that connect the veteran to leading employers? Because that's what you're doing. Actually, you're actually bringing those leading employers on, and you're highlighting the good that they're doing in the community. I was like, well, I'm going to create a national job board, and then when I get done doing it, I'm going to tell Montel where I got the idea, and I'm going to tell him about it. So right now we have a national job board. It's jobs.dvnf.org, or you can go to www.dvnf.org and hit National Job Board. You'll see Montel Williams there. You'll see elevator pitch. We have over 10,000 jobs right now. We have over 85 organizations that have actually registered to post their jobs online. And did you know, Montel, it costs a lot of money to post just one job for 30 days on any website. And I'm not going to highlight what those websites are out there. Well, with DVNF, it's free. It's always going to be free because it serves the veterans that fought for this country to keep it free. And our donors love this website. Our donors love this job board because it's free. Any organization, it's designed and is implemented to support any veteran in need, but it's open to the public. Anyone can go on this job board and look for a job, and just use those same positive attributes and platform that we created for those veterans that are looking for a job. They're great tools, even if you're not a veteran. So we highlight it for veterans, but it's open to the public. And any organization can register and post up to 1,000 jobs if they want free. Always be free. And we will highlight their company as well. We'll highlight them on our page and all our social media. And if you go to our website, you'll see that. You'll see some highlights on the bottom. It's just a wonderful platform.
Several special features, right? I mean, not just that anybody can post it for free, but you've got some other very special features, right?
Oh, definitely. Many. We have an elevator pitch. What job board do you have where you can actually do a 30-second elevator pitch and upload it? And companies that actually registered for the job board can actually view a database of elevator pitches. So let's go to New York. I'm registered to post jobs. Okay, I have a company in New York. Let it be Albany, New York, Schenectady, New York, the city of New York, or even Rochester. And you can say, okay, what's available? Next, these videos pop up. Okay, we have Amelia Keller right here. Let's check it out. And she has that 30-second pitch, and that may be enticing. It's so hard right now to get someone to an interview. So the idea was, let's do an elevator pitch. And I appreciate the help on that as well there, Montel. You did very well. And by the way, your speech was under 30 seconds as well.
Complete disclosure, make sure everybody knows that I'm working with you. And I really just appreciate the opportunity to work with you to do this, Joe. I'm telling you. How successful has it been? I mean, give out the website one more time so people know where to go.
Well, it's www.jobs.dvnf.org. That'll bring you directly to the job board, or you can go to www.dvnf.org and go to the National Job Board tab that we have on the top of the website. And we have over 10,000 jobs listed right now, and we have over 80, 85, close to 90 companies that actually registered to post their jobs on our website. We have a ticker with our call to action, talks about some of the highlights of the website. We have calls to marketing for the back end. If someone wants to donate to keep the website going, they can. But I'm not promoting to donate to DVNF. I've never promoted let's donate to DVNF. I want to talk about the services and the impact that our programs have to offer. And then if the donor likes what we're doing, they see the impact of what our programs are doing, please donate and help. If you don't, I understand. So I'm not going to be that nonprofit organization that's going to have a horrific picture of a wounded warrior, with a donate button. I'm not. I can, but we're not that type of organization. We want to provide the services. We want our services to be seen by impact. We're a national organization. We want to be judged by the impact of what our programs are doing. And if viewers like, or our donors like, or future donors like what we have to offer and how we're serving veterans, then please support us. And that just keeps us going. And
Give
we
them
have a
an
lot of
idea.
donors that believe in us.
Give them an idea of some of the other services you provide. You not only have this job board, but you have plenty of other services.
Oh, we do. We have an online resource center where you can go to www.dvnf.org and hit one of our tabs and circle under that. And then you can look for our resources. By the way, if someone wants Joe Van Fonda, that's been through combat, wounded warrior, dealing with post-traumatic stress, suicide prevention awareness is very dear to me. I will go anywhere in the United States free of charge. I don't ask for money. I will go to a high school, go to a college, I would go to a fire station, first responders, you name it, I'll go. And I'll give you a good hour brief on suicide prevention awareness and how it affects an everyday individual, not just a military individual. Every day, post-traumatic stress is real. PTSD is happening out there. And this COVID and the way the media is creating narrative is just creating hysteria, and it's making things even worse. Imagine a veteran with post-traumatic stress and dealing with COVID, and in the landscape, our economy is changing as well. And our politicians right now are just creating their own narrative for their own good. It's just crazy right now. So, but I would go anywhere throughout the United States. So we have a PTSD platform as well, where you'll be able to actually go and you can actually hit an era of combat, or like, for instance, Vietnam. You can actually sit and listen to testimonies of other wounded warriors that have been through combat and have been through conflicts, and they can talk about their experience with PTSD or suicide and how they work through it. So it's very informative, very informational, and the job is to provide those resources. Let's become a tool. Is there a nonprofit out there that can become a tool? I think there is. There's many out there, and I want DVNF to become a tool to provide those resources and help veterans that are wounded, disabled, and at risk, either direct or by indirect. And by indirect is very simple. I may call you up, hey Montel, let's create a special initiative for 2021. All right, DVNF's going to pledge $100,000. What can we do with it? That's called a special initiative. That's called direct. Let's find a direct cause and let's make it work right there. And then you have your indirect, where it takes a little bit to cultivate, where you fund other nonprofits. Then you're going to rely on them to go beat the ground, and provide those programs and services. So we do.
I will testify to what DVNF has done already. I mean, we worked very closely with Military Makeover, which is a show that I do to help provide some very, very needy veterans, with not a handout, but just a makeover of their home from the ground up, to give them that forever home, something that they can be proud of and work on their resilience at. And so I got to thank you so much for being a part of that show, and also helping like you did with Military Makeover Operation Career, and them forming your own job board. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on for what you guys are doing. And so I'm making sure that all my viewers who have tuned in to Free Thinking know that the DVNF is no joke, my friends. And so I want to make sure that you dig deep, especially right now in the holiday season. I mean, if you got extra bucks, let's send them their way. Help them continue to service those who have done so much to serve us. Joe, what's coming up? What's next? What's going to happen over the next year? 2022 is right around the corner, my brother.
Well, I'm getting ready to strategize with some friends in terms of what my special initiative is going to be for 2022. So I'm excited about some ideas. Our goal right now is to serve more veterans. And here's a struggle right now, Montel. The landscape right now is a little bit jittery. As you know, with logistics and so forth, I'm getting truckings, and I'm competing against big box stores right now to get my health and comfort shipments out. We are taking our health and comfort, we're expanding it. right now, so we're going to take advantage of the slowness right now in terms of logistics, and the concentration is building out our warehouse for our health and comfort. So we want to expand it. So instead of doing 1 or 2 shipments a month, we do up to 3 to 5 if we can. So our goal is to get there. So we're going to take the opportunity while we have a low landscape in terms of logistics, because it's hard to get trucking right now, to build out our warehouse and our in-kind gift donations that we're receiving right now for the holidays. We just had a grab and go a few weeks ago in Baltimore, Maryland. By the way, we served over 200,000. I mean, I served 200,000. We served over 200 veterans that are at risk, that are homeless, and we gave them health and comfort kits. You can go to www.dvnf.org and you can look under our health and comfort. You can see what those kits are made of. $50 gift card. We gave them groceries as well. And it just breaks your heart, but at the same time, it fills your heart up as well, because you're serving veterans. Right now, our concern right now is the cold weather months on the East Coast. So we're hoping to get some socks, some gloves, some beanies, some coat drives. So I think our communication team and program team is going to be working on some initiatives to pull in some in-kind gift donations, which are actually new. We don't take used stuff. We don't want to give away used stuff. So we're working on a few initiatives as we speak.
Cool. I'll help you with those if you want. Let me know if you need me to do a shout out for you. I will.
I appreciate
Again,
that.
I got to tell you, you've been doing and doing and doing, my brother. I mean, we're almost out of time, but if there was a message you wanted to send out to those veterans out there right now who, don't think anybody's got their back, what would you say?
Well, you heard my testimony.
Yes. You walk the walk, my brother. Absolutely.
I care. I do. I really care. My staff cares. They really do. I got these great staff members, and I'm an old sergeant major, and I come out of the Marine Corps. I'm ready. I'm working 12 to 14-hour days. I'm paying them to work 8. But I'm asking them to stay to 12. And for them to put up with me and to learn my battle rhythm, and to understand my leadership and follow me, that means the world to me. My staff does. So without the staff, DVNF wouldn't exist. Of course, without the donors, we wouldn't exist as well. So it's coupled. I got a great board of directors. They don't micromanage me at all. My board of directors, Scott, he's a naval cadet guy. You've met him. He speaks highly of the academy. He gives me the right initiative at the right time. He pulls my reins back at the right time. So I'm the gas, he's the brake. And I got Benny Bashan, I got Greg, I got Tish, I got Barry, I got all these great board members that they're there if I need them, and they are, but they also give me the left and right lateral limits to create strategy and to expand the service and programs. So I want to thank the board of directors as well. So I have the staff, I have the board, and I have the donors. Without those 3 pillars, I can't serve the veteran in need. But I'll tell you what, for the veterans who are out there, there's resources out there. We have more nonprofits you can shake a stick at, and the soundbite that nonprofits uses, why do you exist? Well, we want to fill the gap. It's always about the gap, and there's always a gap. And I'll tell you this, the Veterans Administration is trying. They've been trying, but they're broken. And I'm not sure how they can fix, the line is long. When you're in the military, you get seen, instant obedience to orders, you get seen quick, you're a product, they want you back out on the battlefield. But when you're a veteran, the line gets longer. You're waiting in line, and just continue to wait in line. Reach out to DVNF at www.dvnf.org. Look at our national job board. I'm easy to find. You can communicate with me through my communications email. You can see on our website. I answer all the mail. I don't stray away from phone calls. I don't stray away from hard questions. How do you raise the money? I talk about direct mail. I talk about the percentages, but it's all about the impact. How many veterans can you serve with the programs you provide? But for the veterans out there that are wounded, ill, and injured, or struggling, or you're at that dark place, I've been there with you, brother, sister. We care about you. We love you. And I tell you what, just keep on fighting, because we're fighting with you. All right. If I can help you in any way, please reach out to DVNF. And if I can't help you, God bless you. I can promise you I can provide the right resource for you.
And that I will testify to. I will back you up with that 100%. DVNF is here doing what they need to do to help you as much as possible. So if you're a veteran, make sure you reach out to them, check out their resources, and see what they have available for you. Frank, Frank, Joe, I can't thank you enough, my brother, for being here today with us. Thank you for helping move a couple initiatives forward that I've talked to you about. Um, I look forward to working with you in 2022, seeing if we can do as much as we can to stop just saying thank you for your service, but doing something about
Now,
it.
you're
Okay?
absolutely right there, brother. Montel, thank you for what you're doing. And I like what you're doing out there within the community. You're pulling these veteran supporters into a team. And I'm glad to be part of your team. I can't wait to do more things with you and your family and so forth in the near future. So thank you again. Thanks for having us. Disabled Veterans National Foundation, www.dvnf.org. Hit our national job board. You'll be impressed. It's free. It's always going to be free.
Absolutely. And thank you for tuning in to this edition of Free Thinking with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Free Thinking with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please send us your comments.